From his new solo album, Bankstatement, that's Tony Banks, and Throwback, which is the single from it. Tony's best known for his keyboard work with Genesis. They've been around for over 20 years. They've recorded 16 albums, the vast majority of them hit albums. Tony, good afternoon.
Hello.
The sound of the new solo album, a lot of it is harder and less whimsical than your previous solo works, A Curious Feeling, for instance. Was that deliberate, or is that just the way it turned out?
Well, I think to some extent it's the way it turned out, really. I mean, on this record there's some hard stuff and also got the ballads, you know. I think you're right in saying it's less whimsical, perhaps, than A Curious Feeling, but I did do another solo album in between the two called The Fugitive, which I think has some of the hardness of this record. It
doesn't, though, this album, have one particular sound which hangs it together. It's very diverse. There's all sorts of stuff in there.
Well, I kind of think that. Some people say to me that you know, that it perhaps does sound similar. I mean, because obviously my taste in music, it's all the songs I like, and therefore it puts it into one area. But I like the hard stuff, and I like the soft stuff, and I think a lot of records nowadays, people tend to stay very much in one idiom throughout a record. I think it's easier from promotion purposes and everything. But, you know, it's just that I do like ballads, and so I've thrown two or three of those on.
You've always been the quiet one, haven't you? I mean, Phil Collins has had a series of hit albums he made when he wasn't making films or appearing on television. Mike Rutherford's been about everywhere with Mike and the Mechanics. You have kept a relatively low profile. Was that something you chose to do?
Well, I mean, not in every sense. I mean, I certainly would have liked to have had the records doing a little bit better, some of them, you know, some of the solo albums. I wanted more success from them. But it's my natural tendency to be a bit sort of quieter. I don't tend to sort of seek out the limelight. So... And it's fairly easy to do when you're in a group, obviously with Phil, who's got such a high profile now. It's fairly easy to go into the background.
And you're happy with that?
I'm very happy from a sort of personality point of view. It's just, it can be a problem when you're trying to when you've got a record out and you want people to listen to it, then everyone's sort of a bit kind of like, you've got to remind people that you're there again, you know. But most of the time it's great to be anonymous. You know, you get all the advantages of being in a top group, you know, and everything, without any of the sort of drawbacks.
That's right. You play Stadia all over the world in front of, you know, millions of people on each world tour, and yet you are the one who is actually holding the band together in many ways, hunched over your keyboards, and you could probably walk out of that stadium and people wouldn't recognise you.
Well, that's it. If I walk out with Phil, then I get recognised.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's true. I mean, I haven't got perhaps I'm just not a very memorable person to look at or anything, but I don't seek it. And I mean, it just suits me. That's the way I am. As I said, sometimes it can be a problem there, you know.
I don't know if you're aware, I mentioned that Genesis have been going for over 20 years. I think 23 years since you actually started.
Well, it depends when you look at
20 years since
we released a single back in 21 years ago, I think now, yeah. They've got a song called The Silent Sun, which obviously everybody remembers very, very well. You know, it's a monster hit. And, you know, that was where it all started, really. But we didn't... I sort of look at it in many ways, we went professional in sort of like late 1969. And
that was with Trespass.
Trespass, yes. Yeah. And our whole style changed at that point. And I sort of look at the band, in a way we started there properly. The first period was something very different. We were trying to write...
mini rock operas, really?
Well, the very early days, it was just hit singles, right? That was what we were after, and we failed, absolutely, as the records would tell you. But then with Trespass, we were starting to do more ambitious kind of music, longer stuff, more instrumental music, and less repetition and stuff. And I suppose that's kind of what we became best known for in the early 70s.
I don't know if you're aware, you might well be, but today is the 20th anniversary of Woodstock.
Good Lord.
Which a lot of people see as a highly significant rock event. Mm. Does that mean anything to you at all? Were you influenced by what was happening in 1969? Not necessarily the music itself, but everything the music was connected with, the message.
And probably more with what it was connected with. I never actually saw the film, in fact, you know, so I missed out on all that, and obviously wasn't at the show or anything. I mean, the period was important. I don't know whether it was specifically what was going on there that I found important. I think the late 60s was quite important because it developed, it was when the underground and progressive sort of scene, if you like, started to develop as a sort of secondary string from the modern pop music of the time, and there was this definite second element started to come in, you know, and that was probably what got me more interested in. I mean, I followed that trend, having been very mainstream in the mid-60s with the Beatles and everything, you know. I then found myself following that other trend, which included sort of blues music, I suppose, and groups that I liked, like Family, Fairport Convention, Procol Harum and people, and that kind of led into the sort of music that we ended up doing, I think, in the 70s, which was much more album-based and live-based than it was single-based.
How has your taste, your personal taste, away from what you actually perform, changed, would you say, in the last 20 years? Because one's taste in everything, including music, does change quite radically about every 7 or 8 years or so, I would imagine.
Well, my taste is changed very much in how much I like. I mean, in the mid-60s at least, I liked everything. I really, you know, I liked every track on the radio, I think, to varying or lesser degrees. Whereas now I don't really get that excited about very much. I don't listen all that much, and a lot of what I hear doesn't interest me, although there are good things that still come through. And I'm not sure my actual taste has really changed as much as all that. I mean, I still like music with just a little more substance and, ambitious sort of element to it, and perhaps
Not Stock Aitken and Walton.
Well, I'm not very good with. Well, I look upon as that as a sort of element that's always been in rock music, kind of as a sort of very
it used to be
straightforward
Shin and
bubblegum.
Chapman,
Yes, whatever it is, that's always there, and I think there's anything wrong with that. There's not much underneath that at the moment, or at least what is underneath that I don't like so much.
I'm talking to Tony Banks. We'll be talking again in a moment. I just want to make you feel old for a while, Tony, because
Right.
this is making me feel old. Our engineer has just asked, what was Woodstock? He was born in 1969. Oh, dear. Anyway, I'll give you time to think about that. Stay with us. More from Tony Banks in a minute. Mark Smith on the Lunchtime Show from LBC Radio. My guest this afternoon is Tony Banks from Genesis, and of course a solo artist in his own right. Genesis has changed quite dramatically from the fantasy, the breaking new ground of the early 70s, to the virtually often mainstream pop you are now. I mean, Invisible Touch, just about every track on that album could have been a single, and many of them were. Are you happy with how the sound of the band has evolved?
Well, I mean, I like very much what we do. We work still within quite a wide range of music, I think. I mean, I think there's as I said many times, but I think that the short songs that we do now get very high profile, so everyone's very aware of them. But I mean, Invisible Touch was 50% kind of longer songs and slightly different things as well. I mean, particularly the song Domino and Tonight, and
but that was cut
Brazilian.
down for the single, of course.
It was.
Yeah.
You can make a single out of them. We used to try this in the old days. When we had first hit single in 1978 with Follow You, Follow Me, and I think it was our 19th single release, We tried edits of every single song we'd ever done and lots of things. I just think that we've got better at doing the short stuff. I mean, it's always been an element. I would agree, that obviously, that the emphasis has changed slightly. I still think, though, there is lots of quite, there's ambitious music. I mean, if you listen to a piece like Domino, which is a 10-minute piece, it is still kind of, you're not going to hear anybody else doing a piece like that at the moment, and I think it breaks ground.
Musically, how has new technology changed the way you think? I mean, when Genesis started, you were hampered with cumbersome devices like the Mellotron. Now you can call up a symphony orchestra from a microchip just by pressing a button. Is it less of a challenge because of that?
Well, it's very different. I mean, in the early days, I reckon I got every instrument I used to use every possible sound out of it. My Hammond organ, I used it every single way. You'd put it through fuzz boxes, wire pedals, switch it on and off, and, do anything you could to it to get a different sound out of it. Nowadays, you get an instrument, and of course, you only explore to like 1% of its potential. I mean, they have so much you can do with them, But I love some of the things. I mean, the sampling ability to sample not just sort of notes for sort of string sounds or anything, but also sampling pieces of music and playing around with the tape, like a tape recorder.
You could
slowing it up, speeding it up, and doing anything like that. There's so much you can do with it. It is great fun. I enjoy that very much.
You could do that a bit with the Mellotron, but only on these tape loops.
Well, the Mellotron is a very different thing. I mean, the main problem with the Mellotron was trying to get it to actually produce any sound at all was the main problem. I mean, it was built of vacuum cleaner motors and bicycle chains. I mean, literally, that's what it had in it. But it had a stunning string sound on it, and they later also got a pretty good voice sound on it and things. And these sounds, I suppose, became sort of fairly famous at one point when there was nothing else around that could produce anything even remotely like it.
Genesis has been phenomenally successful. I said one of the most consistently successful British rock bands, possibly the most consistently successful for the time you've been around. When you are guaranteed a success with every album you release, which you are now, does the motivation wane a bit? You don't really have to prove yourself anymore.
I don't think you feel you're guaranteed at all, and this business is a notoriously fickle business, the rock business, and I reckon you're only really as big as your last record and your last single and all that. So I think every time you do it, I mean, when we're writing and recording songs, I mean, this is any whatever music I'm doing, you don't really think at all about the audience. You just can't, really. I mean, you're just doing it, you please yourself. You've always used yourselves as your yardstick, and then you hope for the best, I suppose. And then there comes a point, there's always this terrible moment when you start playing it to people and you think, Christ, and you can often lose confidence at that point, With Genesis, though, people tend to listen with a very positive frame of mind. I mean, people both want to like it and also have a strong feeling that it's got a good chance of being successful. So people listen to it with the right frame of mind. It's much more difficult with a solo record, like what I've just, this Bankstatement thing I've done, because people listen to it with slightly less sort of, they're more tentative in their listening, they're not quite so sure about it. And I think the attitude of the listener is very, very important in this area. And once you've managed to just have some kind of success with one record, then people will listen to your next one with a lot more confidence. How
much of the new album, a predictable question maybe, but how much of the new album is you and how much is Genesis? Because when you've worked with the band for 23 years and you go to record a solo album, it's inevitable that some of the feel and the sound of that band will rub off on that solo album. album.
Well, I mean, as much as there has been, I suppose, in what Phil has done and Mike has done and Peter Gabriel as well, I think that all this, we all came out of a sort of a melting pot of a certain kind, which involved all of us putting ideas in, and we've all been influenced by that particular taste, so I can't extract that. I mean, I tend to follow through on solo records some of the elements that are perhaps more me. I'm very into chords and things, and that element comes through very strongly, I think, on a solo record like it does out of the Genesis records. So there are obviously connections with the Genesis stuff, but there's a lot of different stuff as well, I hope.
Is there intentional humour in the album's title? Tony Banks and Genesis are very bankable, of course. It's called Bankstatement.
Yes, I know. Well, I thought I'd get a bit of stick for this, really. It's just I couldn't resist the word, Bankstatement. Is you're trying to find a word that incorporated my name, that everyone knows, so it runs off the thing. And also you can say that is a statement by Tony Banks, But I like to try slightly avoid the money side of it, but you can't avoid it, really.
For you.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yes, of course. Tony Banks, thank you very much indeed. Bankstatement is the new album. It's out...
I think it's out next week.
It's out. It's in the shops next week. Thank you very much indeed. LBC Radio, 7 minutes to 2.